5:30. So shall we call the meeting to order? Well,
No.
That's all right. We'll wait till we get the go ahead from Jared. All right, we'll call the meeting to order at 5:30. First item on the agenda is roll call.
Kristen Runge,
Here.
Joe Zettelberger,
Here.
Brian Wallace,
Here.
Chris Zellner,
Here.
Sue Springman,
Here.
Mike Steinle.
Here.
Second item is minutes. Do we have any?
I'm here too, Kayla.
Just like. Trisha's also here. Yes. All right. So second item on the agenda is approval of the minutes. Do we have any changes or corrections to the minutes? Seeing none, do we have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve the minutes.
All right, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, next up is public comment, and we have one comment card turned in so far, Robert. And you have, just as with regular board meetings, anyone wishing to make a public comment has 3 minutes to do so.
Good evening, Plan Commission. I just wanted to say, you guys, I'm a little jealous of you all tonight. You guys are going to be the first to see the Highway Q redesign proposal. A little bit of history in this that I just want to get up and talk about because this came about due to a discussion about improvements being done on Q as a result of the extension of the TID district across the street to Q to the west side of Q for the commercial development that's going to go into that area. And the reason that it's really important is because when we had that vote, the first time it failed, when we came back, we actually came back with a unanimous vote when we agreed that we wanted to look at the safety and improvements to this road. So that's a unique area because it was done with TID in the past with the existing district that we're now extending across the road. Now we have an opportunity to really improve safety for children that are crossing it to the schools that are over there, to really beautify it by just by putting in the trees or proposed wildflowers, and also really increasing safety by narrowing the horizon when you're driving down that. It looks like a 4-lane highway right now. People drive it like it's a 4-lane highway. When you have trees, when you have things in there that kind of bring it in a little bit, people will naturally slow down. They'll start to follow the speed limits a bit more. So I really hope that you enjoy what you see in the presentation, that you keep an open mind about it and really think about how that can make that corridor look as you're driving into Waunakee. Thanks.
Thank you, Robert. All right, any other public comments? All right, do we have anyone online, Jared? All right, then we'll close the public comment portion of the meeting and move on to item number 1, discuss and take action on a request by the Waunakee Pet Wellness Complex for a site plan amendment for additional fenced-in play area at 1050 Lillian Street.
So the applicants are seeking an amendment to their site plan to incorporate 2 new fenced-in play areas for the pet wellness complex. Phase 1 is approximately 20 by 40 feet for the new fenced-in area with artificial turf, and that's in the front of the building. Phase 2 is indeterminate in size, also a fenced-in area with natural turf on the southeast part of the building, which would also include moving the dumpster by approximately 42 feet to the south. Staff have not seen a profile view of the proposed fence or a landscaping plan, so we're unable to know whether it complies with the current CUP. Although we would need a CUP amendment, looking at the way the language is written, was originally written for an outdoor play area, not 3 to 4. So we would need to adjust that language. But unfortunately, there's a little bit of an internal miscommunication. We noticed it in the paper as a public hearing, but didn't put it in the agenda as a public hearing. So we would have to wait until a future meeting to do that.
Okay. All right.
And I would just point out that those 2 different postings are not really relevant because you wouldn't be able to move forward tonight on the CUP because we don't at a staff level have what we need to be able to advise and draft an amendment to the CUP.
All right, so our action then, does anyone have any comment on it? No? So we have no action to take then tonight. Is that correct? Yes, do we allow that?
Well,
without the,
with all due respect, I don't think any comments that the individual is going to make a difference. That you can't move forward because there is a CUP on the property and staff did not obtain what it needs to be able to advise you on the CUP. So even if you were to approve a site plan tonight, the property owner still would not be able to move forward because we have to be able to act on the site plan and the CUP.
can you get us that information that we need by the next meeting? So that we can notice this properly?
We would need it by Wednesday,
Okay,
because if
okay.
you want to notice a public hearing for the next plan commission meeting in December, the notice needs to be sent to the newspaper by Friday of this week.
Okay, all right. Thank you for the information. All right, then I guess we're moving on to the next item on the agenda. All right, okay. We'll make sure to circle back around and make sure we're communicating effectively. All right, thank you for making that comment. Item number
That's,
2.
Kristen, that's
Yeah.
also not true. I mean, I don't want to get into this, but just so the planning commission members understand, what was just said is wrong. And there are emails that prove it.
Mm.
So we'll just leave it at that. But I
Thank
just want to
you.
make sure that you all understand that.
Thank you. Thank you. And we'll close the matter. Thank you very much. All right, and I appreciate the clarification, Brian. Item number 2, discussion on MSA County Highway Q corridor study.
Yep, so in June 2024, Village Board hired MSA Professional Services to perform a corridor study of South Century Avenue. We're calling it the County Highway Q study between the village boundary and Centennial Parkway. Since then, we've had a number of internal staff meetings to come up with a preliminary plan of what this could look like. And tonight we're looking for input from Plan Commission. We have interviewed local developers to get their input. Now we're looking for your input as to what the future of this corridor could look like as basically what we're considering the southern gateway to the community, which right now is a highway corridor, and what could we do to maybe make it like welcome to Waunakee as opposed to just, kind of, you're here. So I have Steve Tremlett from MSA tonight is here. He's one of the main planners and urban designers working on this. So he has a presentation and can answer any questions. Yep, so go up there, press the button if it's not green.
Okay. Good evening. So yeah, it's kind of noted by a couple of people already that we're looking at opportunities from basically Centennial all the way to the southern boundary about how we could look at safety, comfort, and aesthetically improving the corridor. This is kind of your first step at kind of determining what that vision could be, with future steps to actually look at the full design, cost, and implementation of that design. So this is kind of the starting point. I think it was already noted that we had discussions with staff. We've talked to landowners. A lot of comments were seeing a need for some improvements, especially with safety. There were questions about how you pay for it. And, this was built before, but most agreed that some improvements are desperately needed in this corridor. Traffic counts, we just recently completed last Thursday. We're doing some calculations of that to determine the traffic counts that we do. There's 4 segments we did basically between each of the main streets all the way up to Centennial. So that this week we'll have that information. We do have speed data information. I noted a couple bullets here of compliance of speed limits and speed design coming in from the rural area northbound is not being very compliant on the speed limits. But compliance generally southbound on Q and on Woodland is in compliance. So tonight is about some of the ideas that presented to landowners and with staff, kind of for a direction of any modifications, big no-nos if you see anything to kind of bring to the public. So the intent is to pick a date early December to bring this as an open house to the public and then come back here again for Plan Commission in January, and then ultimately to board. So there's 4 big ideas. I did provide some information in the packet. We'll go a little bit more in detail through this presentation, but safer intersection crossings, increased comfortability for pedestrian and bikers, improve pedestrian connectivity and the beautification. So just hitting on it a little bit more, here's some existing images of safety within the crossing. What I want to get across in some of the images is the very limited refuge, if there is a crossing section here where someone could stand. In some cases, the crosswalk is in front of this median with no protection, so it's a longer walk across. There are also cases of that slip lane in the far there for that right turn. We'll talk a little bit about that further as well, but typically that is where people don't slow down enough and really pay attention to pedestrians with making that turn. So we'll be talking about potentially removal of that. So some of the things to consider is this ladder design painted on is very apparent and visible. I know many communities have done that red concrete. And as you see over time, it fades and it's harder to read. I live in some prairie and they've painted this over the top of those red crosswalks. So this is a better identification. The other part that we will be talking about and is a major topic item is bike lanes on this corridor. There currently and doesn't project to be significant commuter traffic of using the road for biking. The intention is to improve for families, the kids, the multi-use paths, and make that more connectivity along the sides, reallocate that bike lanes that are currently there to the medians, to take what is at intersections with left turn lanes, where you only have 5-6 feet of that refuge, and make that 16 feet, make it a better condition. The example we're showing here is around 13 feet on East Wash as an example. So we're talking about a few more feet than even that. And that's still not huge, but it's much better condition than current day. These are not. So these are examples. So I'm going to go from like existing to big idea changes. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, your mic, Sue. Did you say the upper
It'd be-
right-hand corner was East Washington?
Correct.
Yeah,
Okay.
it'd be much easier if you could add the street corners if it's Madison, Waunakee on all these pictures, because I was really confused when I was
Okay.
looking at this.
Okay. Understood. And we'll go section by section after the big ideas for the Waunakee vision. So these are images of not Waunakee, of opportunity of how we can improve it. See, these are Waunakee, that's Sarah Lane, on the right there. Again, increasing comfortability for pedestrians and bikers. Right now, there's minimal, terrace, we call it, between the path and the curb in most cases. And there's definitely no places to stop, respite, benches, any of that nature. So part of that discussion will be, these are images of what could be. Looking at street lighting. So there is no current lighting. If you go through there right now after this meeting, you'll see how dark it is beyond a little portion for the road where the median has lighting. There's no lights for the paths. There's many schools that are here, people walking through. Let's talk about through fall, winter, and spring. And so one of the considerations was to add lighting at a lower level along the bike paths sections. Then there is an option of a few locations that maybe benches and some additional landscaping might be nice. Potentially a map in one location. Example here on the right is between Sarah Lane and Woodland. Currently, where the green is, that is where the path is. It was built closer to the road with very little terrace. What we're proposing, when that site at least redevelops, maybe considering moving that path basically typically 1 foot off of the right-of-way line to gain that additional comfort zone and terrace area that doesn't exist now. Pedestrian connectivity, there are gaps in the corridor, notably between Centennial and Woodland on the west side. There is no path. There is the school path on the east side, but there is no path or sidewalk on the west side. Also, currently, but planned for, is no path on the west side from Woodland down to Peaceful Valley. This would propose to have that path connect from Peaceful Valley all the way up to Centennial on that west side. On the east side, we talked on that previous slide about the idea of changing where that location is between Sarah Lane and Woodland Drive to put it closer to the property line. But also, if we are going away from bike lanes on road, it was even discussed with one of the developers, we should make it as safe and easy to maneuver for families on the bike path. So then you see where number 2 is, where there is a hill there, but if you cut into it a little bit, you can more directly have that path connect from the intersection in the northeast corner of that intersection over to the school path. Because otherwise you have to go across, do a direct right, and then do a direct left. And then also notably in Peaceful Valley, there is no sidewalk or path on the south side of Peaceful Valley where the number 4 is. And so there is an opportunity to go down to 1 lane in that portion. It already does go as you go east. It just doesn't start as a 1 lane. And so if you make that a 1 lane, you could have a decent terrace and still have a sidewalk there that doesn't exist now. Lighting was one item discussed. So currently these are the poles here on the left. 2 arms, pretty standard DOT. Consideration is to go to all lighting being similar to what you see further north on the corridor and through the downtown, with the median being the double arm style. We didn't have a picture of it, but we mimicked it there. You see in the little picture. So those are again still at 25, 30 feet tall, but along the multi-use paths, put in the pedestrian poles at 16 to 18 feet tall. With landscaping, currently the medians have no landscaping. There's no landscaping in the terraces. Consideration of specific nodes of areas, roughly, this example here in the middle is about 110 feet long. So I'll show you in the graphics where those are located, but they're not throughout. So we don't want to overdo the maintenance along the whole stretch, but they'll have little nodes of these that could look like this, where you have some prairie grasses, number mixed 2, and then you have a little more color on the other side and you have ornamental trees. If we are removing the bike lanes, then you can get a 20-foot section of the decorative landscaping bed, and then you can have a mobile path on each side. That also allows for maturity of plants not going on the roadway, allows for snow to build up and not impact the planting areas. If it were chosen not to look at removing the bike lanes, we are showing that 20-foot option, which then I would think you'd want a hardscape edge. So again, so the maturity of the trees, of the plants can grow and there's a little bit of separation between that and the curb and the drive lane. And in those cases, then you'll have some sections that are down as narrow as 8 feet. So that's why you see that other option where there's no trees, but there are plantings and again, that hardscape edge. Preferred in what we talked about is more of the middle section where we would eliminate the bike lanes and you would have that 30 feet. Or in cases where there is 8, you would get it up to 18. So you can again add trees in those certain nodes. And one thing that was discussed with the developers is, trees in front of commercial. We try to minimize the number of trees because everyone's visibility, but also you can look at trees that are very vertical. So they're not very wide. So those are the big ideas. Now let's see, how does that form into the sections? So from Centennial, you see green are the trees that are more canopy or vertical trees off the sides. The little node here, the green, that's one of those nodes that we're talking about, those ornamental trees in one segment within the median. We are seeing that path. The purple are new pedestrian scale lights. That's the 16 to 18 foot tall. They're spaced roughly about 120 to 130. If you want to refer that to how the downtown is, it's each light on the side of the road is about that distance, 130, but it's a switchback. So every like 70 feet or 60 feet, there's a light depending which side of the road you're on. But the one side, if you just look at that, but again, we're looking at a much wider intersection of roadway here that almost the individual pedestrian lights are lighting just a section there, not the big roadway. The big roadway is being lit by the median. Other notable is if you do remove the bike lane, see this more and more where it's taking that bike lane and it ends it, where it's actually, there's a ramp up for those bikers to get onto the multi-use path. So you're taking them from on-road to off-road in a safe way. Another thing we looked at was, this is Woodland. So the east-west is Woodland. This is Q. About the northeast corner specifically, and looking at truck movement. So you see a bunch of lines. The main point trying to get across is the orange, yellow, and the red are turning movements typical for trucks. The black line is showing where that curb line can go and still have space for those trucks. Why do this? Shortens the distance someone has to cross as a walker, and it also narrows the road. And so that's the main corner we looked at, because the southern ones are closer to that radii. The one in the northwest, there are some truck movements that happen for trucks that are using that road that we didn't want to alter that for school buses and some other trucking uses. One topic was discussed with developer was, right now this goes kind of like 2 lanes down to 1, and I'll go back. 2 lanes down to 1 northbound, and then there's the turn lane into the school. One topic I would like reaction to is interest in seeing that actually be 2 lanes all the way to the school. Ultimately, then it would just become a right-in only at some point transition, but instead of going down 2 to 1 and back to the turn lane, that's one option. In that case, I would say that there would be no bike lane, but consideration of if it remains as it is now, maybe you do keep a bike lane in this portion northbound only. Southbound, remember we talked about this slip transition to the multi-use path, but on northbound, you might want to keep that bike lane, but we're already tightening that corner already. And that what we talked about in this slide. So why don't I pause? Maybe I should have paused before. I don't know, we want to get some reactions. I can go back a little bit, but we can first maybe start with this topic. Did you ever think about like 2 lanes here going north, turning into the school? Any concerns with reducing that radii in the northeast corner? Any reactions to that?
Reactions, everybody.
You don't have the traffic patterns now, or how much volume is there? Oh, sorry. I know you're still getting the traffic patterns now. Do you have prior traffic patterns so you can kind of compare from, like, say if the last traffic pattern was 10 years ago, what it is now, to see how much growth? And is there ability to project and see, okay, is this gonna work 10 years from now? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So that was partly why we did the counts, is because there's only a count further north of here and south of the village currently. So we do have data there, but not to the level of understanding where turning's happening between the village start to Centennial. So we can extrapolate a little bit and have some determination of that growth overall, but current data is only further south and further north of here.
Thank you.
Yep. Yes.
But you don't have any data to project into the future, because if we look at all the population numbers, the projections for growth in Dane County, they're huge. And we need to keep that in mind, I think, or at least look at that.
Yeah, I agree that it was overbuilt at the time for future growth. A 2-lane road can handle, I don't want to get it wrong, but I think it's at least 15,000 trips a day. So it's designed, and we're not suggesting eliminating lanes here in this whole thing, right? This was just introducing a corner that is a little tighter radii, with the option that wasn't originally planned by MSA of the conversation of, do we do a 2-lane all the way up to the school here? So in no case are we suggesting removing lanes other than bike lanes.
To that point, I just want to confirm. So what this is, it's not really getting rid of bike lanes. It's just shifting them off to those.
To the multi-use path, correct,
So it's still going to be fully accessible to bikes.
Off-road.
correct.
That's good.
The amount of pedestrian and bikers on this doesn't almost warrant the double facility. And if we make it safer for everyone that would use the trail, that's a win. and you're reducing the crossing distance that people have to walk throughout the corridor.
All right, Tricia.
Mine will probably come in a little bit later. Are we talking just this slide or just in general right now? I guess because some of my questions are on some of the previous
We
discussions.
can go back since I should have stopped earlier. Yeah, we can go back.
Oh, I don't know how I feel about removing the bike lanes only because, and I'm not a biker, but all I've heard is don't mix bikers and pedestrians on the same like sidewalk or path. That's why they want to be separated. So I think I would want to hear more from people who do bike, whether it's to work or to school every day, or just kind of get that feedback. The other, pause I have is taking out a median that was just put in not that long ago to widen it. And I get where the like shrinking the distance of the pedestrian crossing is the consideration and the goal. But I think sometimes too, especially on an area where we've got a lot of in and out traffic and you're going to be adding to that with the additional households, like sometimes even just crossing Peaceful Valley that way, just because of the landscaping, while it's beautiful, sometimes like hard to see, like you just get, so I don't know, I'm just a little bit hesitant about taking out something just to widen if it's not going to necessarily achieve what the safety criteria that we need. So I don't know. It's more of a question mark in my head, but
From a
Thank you.
transportation standpoint, transportation planning standpoint, you have different levels of people who ride bikes, and you have like the strong and fearless type who are always going to ride on the road no matter what because they want the straightest path with the fewest obstacles. Those people are almost always going to choose to ride off of a trail because the trail creates impediments, whether it's other bikers, pedestrians, the number of stops usually increases. And so if you remove the bike lane, you're not necessarily creating more conflict on the trail. You're making it safer in the area for people who are a little less comfortable with biking. But the other people who are like the what I used to be the crazy spandex wearing like clip into my pedals kind of person, would 98% of the time choose to ride on the road if they felt more comfortable there. So regardless of whether you remove that bike lane, those people are still going to be riding on the road.
Joe. Thank you, Lauren.
As Robert said, I'm trying to keep an open mind on this. I'm not against what I'm seeing so far. I'm not strongly for it. I think there's a whole lot more that we have to look at. In my mind, the bigger picture is what is the cost to do any number of these different things and what is the value that we're getting? And then layering that over the growth of the longer term. So there's a whole lot more info that I need yet.
Ryan.
I would echo some of those same comments. I'm trying to stay open here, but well, how did you do your traffic counts?
They set up 4 cameras for 24 hours.
Was that on like Sunday morning or?
It was Thursday.
Sorry, most of the time they do counts on Friday after Thanksgiving, so I just want to know.
No, we made sure to pick a day. It was not raining this week. And yeah, it was set up on Wednesday, went Thursday.
Okay, because you know, did you have a number on that offhand? Counts one way or the other, or?
Don't at this time, no.
Okay, I mean, because just the development that's started on the west side is gonna probably add plus or minus 1,000 more vehicles to that road, that corridor, I would guess. That doesn't even take into account some of the potential commercial development that comes from that. I get trying to create some safer crossing points on how we can focus on those areas, you know, say Woodland and Q, Centennial and Q's already, you know, they run crossing guards down there and stuff, but you know, Peaceful Valley be another one, how we can create some safer crossings, but I'd be reluctant to say that widening the median, putting a bunch of vegetation and growth and reducing the visible or lighting is going to make it safer. So, and to the point about the bikers on the road, you take the bike path away and then you put them on the road in a 22-foot wide road or a 24-foot wide road and they're taking up a lane. What does that create for congestion down the road? So, you know, some of the things here, the off-road bike paths I think are great. Could have used some vegetation, some trees and stuff along the corridor, sure, but in pockets and making sure that's not obstructing future visibility issues.
Chris?
I'm gonna reserve until we're done with the whole presentation. That's okay.
I'm gonna
reserve until we're done with the presentation for my questions I've got listed here. Thank you.
All right, likewise.
Okay. So I will note that when we are, well, I'll go right here then. So another thing that was discussed again was that connection on the east side, east leg of this intersection to make that more continuous to connect to the school path. So you're seeing that here, potential option to when you have to retain back a few feet because there is a little slope there. You could build in like a limestone wall that says, welcome to the village of Waunakee. Potentially with being this a big part of the development is happening with Kilkenny Farms West. Maybe they could have one that's kitty corner of that says about their subdivision potentially. I know that there's interest in moving the box that currently exists here. That could be looked at as well as moving that out of the visibility of that. And then you're seeing this example of what that narrowing of that going northbound out of the intersection with the tighter curve. And that's where it's only a one lane scenario going north from there. Oops, went the wrong way. But this is where I want to hit on where those specific locations are for the landscaping. It's intended to be not right adjacent to the walkways. So they are set back here and here, distance from those intersections. So again, you're seeing basically one per median. There's a section, and then these are actually smaller. This is half the size to the ones we were presenting. We're 110 wide. So it's only 3 trees there in that location. And then on the south end here, where we talked about removal of that right turn lane with the little triangle where you would stand, that again, we looked at truck movements through there and narrowing it up where you would have at least 19 feet from curb face to curb face on Peaceful Valley to allow if a stalled vehicle was there, you can still get around it, but then achieving the ability to have a path that doesn't exist on the south side of that road. Vehicles now would have to make that turn by stopping at the intersection, actually seeing that there's a pedestrian right next to them and actually maybe slowing traffic down on that turn. But it's still in a turn lane. It's not eliminating a turn lane. It's just eliminating the slip quick through cut through area. So that shortens the distance that you would walk to the north. Yes, the segment here, single segment would be a little bit longer. But if you collectively add in all the crosswalks to get across west, it's basically the same. But the main thing for me, and when we looked at this was, I drive those slip lanes. I know how fast you go through there and how much you slow down a little bit, but you're looking left, especially when this becomes another leg here, you're looking left for traffic. You're not looking right for the pedestrian. And so that was a big thing here, looking at that. It also offers an opportunity for this respite area where you can have again another bench. It's going to be far enough back. There's enough real estate there now to allow for that, not being in the viewing triangle.
One other thing related to the slip lane when we were talking about it at a staff level, is I've actually gotten some complaints from people who live at the corner of Peaceful Valley and Simon Crestway. And what ends up happening is people use that slip lane as almost an on-ramp to Peaceful Valley Parkway as opposed to a turn lane. And then they get in some pretty high speeds by the time they hit Simon Crestway. And so one of the considerations we made that we asked the consultant to look at was what happens if we turn that into a right turn bay as opposed to a slip lane? Does that slow traffic down and possibly make it safer one intersection down?
Sorry, I just want to hit on the slide before where you talked about potential 2 lanes into the school area. Before we get too far away from it. Yeah, right there, right? Where you talked about potentially 2 lanes down to Centennial Parkway,
Correct.
where the right lane would just be a dedicated right turn. I think it actually flows pretty well right now. It's interesting that it's 2 lanes and you only got a short distance to converge into 1 lane or merge into 1 lane, but it seems to work pretty well. I'd be a little concerned about 2 lanes all the way and then having that right turn just die off, right?
Mhm.
Right at a major school crossing. I've been caught in that before where I then have to try to get over. So, that's always an issue because people get in those lanes. Now, not people that are here that have been in it, right? But new people or somebody new coming through town, they see that and they get caught in that lane and then all of a sudden it just stops, right?
Sure.
So.
Yep.
We've been talking about that there are the problems with the slip lane. So what, I'm pleading ignorance on this. What's the advantage of a slip lane, or why did we originally do it in the first place? Or what's the pro of it? Will we be giving up?
Well, I was talking to our traffic engineers and their response to that is says it slows traffic, and I was kind of confused. I didn't have a full debate with him on the purpose of that. I wasn't here for that decision here. I've always found it to be a quicker way to get to the next street. But for a traffic engineer, they say they typically put them in actually to reduce speeds. But I would think if you have to do a full complete stop at the intersection and make a tighter turn, I would think that would slow traffic as well. So conflicting response on that. I'm sorry.
Thanks.
All right, any other comments before we go on? All right.
Now we're looking from Peaceful Valley down to Water Wheel. Again, it's the same thing that you're seeing repetitive, is the idea that you have these sections, a little landscaping section that are once per median. It has the trees that are basically, I didn't mention it, basically on point where you would have the current median lights. And that's then spaced between the two pedestrian lights that are kind of between that gap. And that's what you'll see. So it's a continuation that you see throughout the corridor. There are a few locations we didn't put the canopy tree on the outsides because of where existing signage is. So we looked at that as well. So there are a few gaps because of that. And then just to round out to the village limits, the idea of having a entry sign in the median. That's where that blue label is. And then one of those landscaping pieces would be right behind it. You would have another opportunity for the bikers from the south going northbound to get onto the multi-use path here when you enter into the community. And here's a quick little sketch of the top of what current day is, 20-foot median, and the lanes there, and how if you expand to 30, you can have that mobile edge. You can have, what is that, yellowish orange is that decorative landscaping section with the sign. Could be typical like your current sign, but maybe it's double column, one on each side, with the multi-use path on the right. So that is what I wanted to cover. We can go backwards, and the big thing here is, what do you like? What are you really concerned with presenting to the public?
All right, so let's start down with you again first, Mike.
I guess one of my questions on this, as I look at it, I like the idea of it and a lot about it. This isn't that old of a road. And I kind of like this has been mentioned, there's going to be some significant cost here. And can you say for sure that, okay, if we do this, we're not going to all of a sudden need another lane somewhere, a turn lane, which means we're going to have to move a bike lane or a multi-use lane, or is this going to handle this for the foreseeable future? And what are we looking at?
Yeah, so like, well, we did not eliminate any lanes other than bike lanes. Even with, we talked about that slip lane removal, there is a dedicated right turn lane. So we're not changing the functionality of the road outside of not having dedicated bike lane. And we can still have that conversation if it's an option A or B on that. But generally speaking, everything we presented here does not change the number of driving lanes or turn lanes.
Have you started working up costs for this project?
I did just ask, generally, it wasn't part of the scope, but I knew this question might come up, right? I get it. I would say that if you got to move the inlets, where there's 10 sets of them, we looked, you can currently say around 5,000 per set. So that's $50,000. If you're looking at moving the medians, right now we're discussing collectively linear feet. It's probably about $100 per linear foot. I had that counted up. Right now is roughly about a little less than 1,400 linear feet. So we're looking somewhere between, where did I land on that? No, I'm sorry, 3,800 linear feet. I was like, that number didn't make sense. So we're talking about $400,000 to $500,000. You know, I will say one interesting idea, and I don't know if I've seen it, is if my main push on this is the intersections where you are really strapped on space for people to have a refuge. The rest of the area, yeah, we can fit landscaping in 20 feet versus 30 feet. I just don't know the reaction to the idea that you would pull out the curb lines at the intersections to that 30 and you just not allow parking or drive lane in that section between. So you would go just you widen out there, maybe to a certain point, widen out up there, but this middle section, it might just be an orange, no use section. That way you're only putting the cost into a certain distance back from each intersection. Now, I've never seen that out there. People might ask you why you did that. But I did find that it's one way to, what I really was looking at is intersections, but I also don't want the road to go in and out, right? So it's keep that same drive lane and only utilize the curbing coming out at the intersections for increasing that refuge. So just a spitball thing that I thought about on the way over here.
Besides the traffic data you're gathering, have you gathered anything as far as accident data or anything that's been happening along this stretch?
That wasn't part of the scope. I don't, yeah, sorry.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Sue?
So is that median new? You're proposing to put that whole new median in?
I mean, the road was constructed. I don't,
I
What are you
can't
asking? Sorry.
remember if the median strip is already there from.
this is all
Waunakee.
here existing.
Yeah.
I'm
Yep.
sorry, it is.
This is
there?
existing. This is existing.
That's all existing.
Correct.
So this doesn't change any of the exiting or access issues of the church and people on the other side.
Does not.
Okay. And you're saying $400,000 to $500,000 for this whole project all the way to Centennial?
For the median specific item.
I think we probably want the whole cost.
Yeah, like the whole,
And I'm kind of assuming based on Robert's comments that he would apply TIF to some of this, which is, I think, I mean, he would have to get support for it, but there might be increment. I would be, anyway, so I like some of it, but I would be very concerned about doing too much landscaping that obscures people's views and the cost of it. Bill will have to weigh in on that at some time. Madison did these beautiful median strips up East Washington Avenue. And at the time I said, are you gonna be able to afford to maintain them? Yeah. Now they're, concreting them over, or they're just something totally different. They're doing it all over the city because they can't afford it. So I think we have to be very careful where we put, even though I love it, it's beautiful, but I know it's infeasible to maintain it over time. Trees are great, those are easier, but we should be careful about that. The pedestrian stuff is really important. At certain intersections, I think marking crosswalks works well. I love the pedestrian flashing lights at certain, I think those work really well. I'd be concerned about going too far out into intersections because of snow and people being able to get around the corners, because I can see what Madison's done in some places, and I can't wait to see how they remove their snow from some of these places. And I see the cars going over the curbs, and so you don't seem to go out too far. It seems pretty reasonable, but I can't really tell for sure. I think there's a lot to study and a lot of input. I don't know how much pedestrian traffic we get in that area anyway. When I look at what the uses are, I don't know, people walking along highways, and it is a highway. It will always, be a highway. I think we have to recognize that. I like the idea of improving the look going into Waunakee, but I was more concerned about Woodland into downtown because I think that's so unattractive. I would love to see trees all the way down to Main Street and that looking more like our downtown. This area, I think, doesn't look bad. So just some general, there's lots of comments to be made. And this is really the first we've looked at it. So, I mean, there's, I think, some viable things, but some other things to be considered.
All right, thank you, Sue. Tricia?
A couple of things back to, I don't know. Sorry about that. turning this would be off of Century, making that a right turn only into the school at that intersection, on Centennial. The concern I have about doing that is that it just pushes more of the the southbound traffic into other areas that are already very congested during school hours. So I don't know if maybe there's just something to think about with that is where does that traffic go that otherwise would have come down from the south and gone into the school for drop off or pick up at that direction. I don't hate the medians the way they are now. I see where it's going, but I think that improvement could be maybe something that's phased over time or like do, you know, some of the aesthetic improvements to what is existing right now. And I think really maybe increasing, I like to agree with you with the whether it's the flashing lights and the white pavement really at those three main intersections of would be Water Wheel, Peaceful Valley and Woodland. And then the bike, walking, pedestrian paths, you know, along both sides, taking traffic to those main intersections and just making those key crossing areas. You know, on both sides, it already exists pretty much on the east side. And as it's developed and having something, so that way you've got an option depending on where you're coming from or where you're heading. I guess first reactions.
I just want to be clear on the flashing part. Are we talking about what, like how you cross at Centennial? There are
Well, and I know
RFPs?
there's not the signalization right now at Peaceful Valley. I don't know if that was considered or not. But even just having like the light up in the street. Yeah.
Like on,
Yeah.
by going
Yeah.
across to the school there on Centennial, there's a button you can hit and it flashes.
Yeah, so that's all I want to make clarity is at signalized traffic intersections, that wouldn't be allowed. It's usually at locations that aren't controlled in that fashion.
So like just Peaceful Valley then at that point, right? That's not,
Is it signal? I thought it was signal.
Yeah.
it is, okay.
Yeah. So I just want to make that
Unless I stop
clarification.
there.
Ditto. So, all right, Joe.
I thought Sue really kind of hit something on the head here, which is this has been a highway. It's going to remain a highway. So while there are safety things that we can do, we need to really keep in mind that we're trying to balance pedestrian use in what is inherently a much heavier vehicle area. Just a couple of quick thoughts. I would love to see more trees along here. So to me, that's kind of a slam dunk. The safety pieces along the longer stretches, there's value, I think, in doing some of that. I just don't know that there's sufficient value based on what that cost probably is. At some of the intersections, that's probably my biggest concern. Woodland and Peaceful Valley Parkway are kind of the two that I have the most concerns about. I would love to see the additional painting wherever it doesn't already exist. I think that's a really, really easy thing to take care of. I'm not sure about reworking some of those intersections. That right turn at Peaceful Valley Parkway, there's part of me that says, yeah, there's probably some good value there. But again, I need to know what the cost of doing something like that is. I guess that's kind of the end of my rambling. I'm not against this overall. I think as far as what you take to the public, take it all. There's nothing in here that strikes me as, yeah, that's off the table right from the start.
Yep.
So.
All right, Brian.
Again, I would echo a lot of what Joe said. Yeah, I think I said it before. I would focus the efforts. I mean, the trees along the corridor, I think is an important aesthetic improvement. I'm assuming we can put trees in a 20-foot median. We don't need to be 30, but that might have some restrictions as they get older. I probably won't have to worry about that, but as far as the intersection, that's where I think we really need to focus on our improvements. If we're looking at that and even include Centennial on that because of the school access area. So you got Centennial, you got Woodland, Peaceful Valley Parkway for now. you know, how we can improve the intersections as they currently exist to improve pedestrian crossing, whether if that means moving the crosswalks back, you know, providing some safer landings, bigger landings on the outsides. I don't know that I would do it by changing the medians over. Maybe it's something with the way the lighting is, longer time frames. You talked about not having the flashing beacon ones that we use in various spots with a great deal of success. But is there something out there that alerts drivers that there's, you know, hey, this is stop for pedestrian, you know, and it's not just a red light, right? Is there something? I don't know what that might be, but improvement in those areas I think is important. And then I could get behind the bike path or the pedestrian path, multi-use path off the road a little further. I think I could get behind that, but as far as changing the existing layout of the road, I would be concerned about changing that too much from what it already is, because it is really about moving traffic by the time you get to this area heading out of town. It's about getting traffic out of the way. And if we tighten that up, it's gonna have some impacts, especially if we continue to grow. Like I said, we got one development that's gonna add over 1,000 right now, and what's that gonna be 5 years from now, 10 years from now? So, and then as far as the lighting, visibility, you know, hey, some decorative lights on the outside, I could get behind that. Those light poles are not cheap. You go through and replace all these light poles. It's $1 million probably to replace all them light poles down that corridor. So we've just spent the money to put the ones up, and they got good visibility along the road. If you want to put additional lighting along the path, I could get behind that as well. But I would focus the energy on the intersections.
Thank you, Brian. Chris?
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation too.
Sure.
And, I even wrote a note to myself, turn on my mic. Right there, turn on mic. I put that
Still
on there, so. So, a lot of different ways for me on this one right now with what my thoughts are. So since I was part of the initial plan in putting this corridor in, originally, I have thoughts, with it. I look at this as something that's premature, for the whole picture right now. I don't know where the county sits on this. Are they gonna be involved in this at all?
Not currently in process with MSA, no.
Okay, but as we go through this process, will they be involved? Because I know that once we did this road, it was turned over to us, this section. Is that correct? So what about beyond that section? Is that still the county, and is that Westport? And do we have any agreements with Westport or anything for moving the road forward still? Because I think that's a real key component of this, because this is 8 years old. And a lot of money was spent on this, 7 million, 5.7, 5.8, whatever $1 million it was to upgrade where we went to. And I would assume and when we were going through this, that we had standards in play for lighting to make sure we met all the standards of what lighting needed to be for this highway coming in. And it is a highway. It's still considered a highway. I don't know what's going to happen with Westport right now and Waunakee with the different land use around this area. And I know that as far as pedestrian accidents, I don't know of any pedestrian accidents in this area currently. I know we're going to add a lot to it, and that's what we're talking about right now. I'm all behind safety. If there's something we can do to make the intersections more safety, I'm on board with that. I just have a hard time with, it's only 8 years and we don't have the subdivision there to have any data to see what we need to do as far as I'm concerned. And to Brian's comment, what are those traffic counts? Can we look back 8 years to see what the traffic counts were when we went to the 4 lanes versus 2 lanes? That it was at that time. We continue to grow. We're growing at a nice pace. We're not growing too fast. We're not growing too slow, but we are growing that. I don't like that we're comparing ourselves to Madison. I don't even like talking about Madison in this because we are not even close to Madison and what they have. You know, the picture you showed 3 lanes, which included another bus lane and a bicycle lane. We're nowhere near that. So to use Madison as an example, I think that's just far fetched. Maybe if we look at some Prairie, Middleton, some of the things that they're doing with theirs, that might make more sense to me because we are growing at a pace that will end up at their size at some point, but we're not there even. So to use Madison, I just don't think is a good example. I love adding beauty to the community. It's what we do, but I do think the village board is going to need to make some decisions on what they want to do with paths and sidewalks. I mean, we have sidewalks on some streets that have one sidewalk on one side and no sidewalks on the other. Now we're looking at putting two on this corridor, and there's not really any residential that's gonna be where those sidewalks are. We're gonna have maybe some commercial there. And I see that we're gonna have a road that's gonna go behind with the parkway, and match up over to Holiday Drive, I believe is where it matches. That makes more sense for me, making sure we have pedestrians over there to get up rather than coming up that stretch. I'm not an expert though. We rely on you for this information. So I'm trying to keep an open mind to it. The light structures are very expensive, to put that and change that right now. I don't know who's gonna pay for that. I would assume it's gonna be the village and the taxpayers would have to pay for that. So upgrading something that's 8 years old, when I think of our main street that took 50 or 60 years, I don't even know how long to upgrade our lights there. And all of a sudden we're gonna switch something really quick here. I can't even fathom that we would do that and the costs that would go with it. So anyway, those are some, but I'm open to the safety aspect of it and the trees and I think the benches along the path also would be great. The bike lanes, again, I would look and say, what are Sun Prairie and what are Middleton doing with theirs right now with similar intersections, similar highway situations to us, and what they're doing? That makes more sense to me to look at them. I can't put Madison into my head, in talking about Waunakee.
Well, I'll find a better picture. That was purely just to get the distance of that median. And it wasn't about the rest of the whole street.
Yeah, and
So-
again, when I hear that, it just
Sure,
right away, that's where my head goes.
sure.
Waunakee's a little different, especially, and then you're talking about the signage to come into town. Our welcome to Waunakee sign currently resides in Westport. So, that's another, issue that maybe could be taken up and, what's gonna happen here in the future, but. So I actually like that we would put a welcome to Waunakee sign on Waunakee land.
Sure.
At that.
And I just want to reiterate that, as scoped to work with MSA on this is visioning, not saying it has to happen in the next 3 or 5 years. This is long-term what it could be improved to. Some of these improvements might not be happening anytime soon. The number of lights might go down when we work through that. Again, this is like the visionary to get to the engineering. But yes, cost is a big factor. I agree. Right now it's trying to key in on the big ideas and improvement. And it gets whittled down once you work into the engineering of it by location. And I totally heard this whole time that the biggest concerns are Woodland Crossing and Peaceful Valley Crossing. And so thinking about just even that stretch, if we were to do something related to the bike lanes, maybe it needs to be more localized between those two intersections. But not saying we do it at all, just saying that might be the better look at how we manage the costs with the idea of improving those two intersections. But if the direction is everyone's comfortable with what the refuge is now at those intersections, then that doesn't make sense to do that change. But moving them within the refuge where they're not, like this example, this is where it currently is. That's an easy thing that should be looked at.
So if we talk,
So, go ahead.
sorry, one more thing, is that okay?
Yep, absolutely.
It just reminded me. So we talked about the slip lane versus the full change on that. And yet your engineers at your location say that the slip lane actually slows traffic or is meant to, but it's not, in your opinion, that. So if we went to another engineering firm, what would their take be on that? You made it so it's a little uncomfortable for me to follow whether it's a good thing or not a good thing.
I'm just being honest. You heard also observation is one thing. That's probably the biggest thing is what is being observed. And that was noted by Lauren that it's been noted people are passing through there quickly. So you could model it. You could talk about good practice, but what is it being observed? So I would take that as the biggest response to that.
So I do have a lot of observation since my place of work is right
Yeah.
there.
Yep.
So I see it often where traffic is, and I'm there many times during the day at rush hour, at busy times versus slow times. And I think that people do drive too fast into certain areas. They're trying to get into the single zones by the school. I think that that's a good change that we could make there. To your point, though, is that the right spot where you're driving it right into that school location? So.
Now, when, excuse me, when we set you on this job, we said, provide us with a beautiful pedestrian friendly all-in kind of plan for what we could do within, what we thought our reasonable limits were. And I really appreciate all the work that you've done and the groundwork you did in talking to stakeholders ahead of time and vetting all of the ideas. I'll say for me, you wouldn't know it by looking at my yard the last 2 years, but I'm a gardener. And this is the landscaping in particular, I think would really complement what we consider to be one of our more beautiful entrances into the community. So the trees, the landscaping, the pedestrian respite areas, the benches, I can see all of those elements making this area more attractive than it even is now and really attracting more pedestrian traffic because it's going to enhance the beautiful architecture and the lovely businesses that we have over in that area. I think that we heard, we're the advance guard for the public meeting that we're going to be having. And I think you probably got the impression that people are going to be concerned about cost and age of the infrastructure and whatnot. And I certainly think we spoke to that tonight. Some of the other things I think I really liked about it, I liked the idea of a map and some wayfinding that we could be putting up in this area. The area from the top of the hill in Woodland down to the high school, I'm with you, Sue. I've always thought that like these are like lost opportunities for really making the community beautiful. So, the beautification of that area and softening that up is, I think, also really great ideas as well. So I'm really interested. I don't have a strong opinion one way or the other now, but I do know that cost and practicality, of course, are going to be foremost in mind. But I really like a lot of the ideas that you presented today and some of the low-hanging fruit, like painting the crosswalks and signalizing the non-signaled intersections and whatnot would be really great. And Sue, you had a comment I think that you were going to make.
Is it possible for you to have budget information before you go to the public and also a discussion at the board about potential phasing? Because there are priorities.
I think that it's almost an iterative process. So, what we discuss here, what the board will discuss, what's at the public hearing, probably, this is like the full menu of what we could do. How much we would allocate to spending and what it would cost would ultimately be out of these ideas. I think what we pick and choose. So, yeah, I do appreciate the little bit of information. I've, 38,000 linear square feet at $100 a foot. We know how many traffic lights we would need to replace if we would do this, as opposed to just maybe putting the lights on the pedestrian path and keeping the existing ones. I would have certainly a lot of choices. Yeah.
If I could just, I think this is all good stuff here as far as like you talked about big idea, right? One thing I would suggest, though, if we're gonna take this to the community for public hearing or just a public open house type of situation, is how we frame this in such a manner that, hey, these are just that, these are ideas of things we can do and not, because some people are gonna look at this and say, well, we're gonna do all this, right? So how do we frame this in such a manner that these are things we've kicked around to try to make some improvements and, it can all be on the table. Some of it can be on the table or none of it can be on the table. And how do we frame that with the public so that they can absorb it effectively? Otherwise, they look at this right from the get-go and say, you're going to try to do all this? Oh my God, right?
Yep.
I'm going to move to Madison.
Chris.
Last thing, I just want to say to Mrs. Ziegler and her son Brian, who was my classmate, I don't want to move or change the sign that says welcome to Waunakee. Her husband was involved in that and it's very special to her as well as to the community. So I just want to clarify that I'm not getting myself in trouble with.
Sign is why we're on the map. So that is how everyone knows Waunakee, from that sign.
And then just so everyone's aware of the process, the schedule moving forward is this is what the point of this was tonight, was to get your input on kind of staff's first stab at what this could look like. Within the first couple of weeks of December is when we would have a public open house that's open to the community to have their input. And then once we have that input, kind of come up with a more refined plan to bring it back to Plan Commission in January and then to Village Board the week after.
All right. Thank you. Thank
Thank you.
you. Any other questions? Yep.
I would just hope you could find a way to get to the public other than a public meeting because people are so busy, parents with kids and
Mhm.
sports, et cetera, et cetera. The attendance is a fraction of what the population is. So if there's a way to get more information out, I would hope we could do that.
Could we do a Zoom? I'm wondering on this. Maybe we could talk about that.
We can talk about it. It would have to be at a staff level because it's outside the scope.
Okay.
We scoped, and have a contract for an open house. But we could also talk to Kaylin about doing a video about it or,
Yeah.
what other options might look
Or
like.
could she even record if at the open
Okay.
house, certain
Yeah.
concepts are being described? Kind of
Mhm.
document that and then put that out on the social media for
Yeah.
feedback.
Yeah,
I think
we
it's
can
a great
take a
way
look
to
at
do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we've done that a lot at work. Yeah, just recorded our presentations. Thank you. Yeah, it's exciting to see kind of somebody else's vision of what our community could look like. So I appreciate it very much. And thank you, Lauren, for all of the work that went into this. I know this has been months and months of work and we appreciate it. All right. What else we got on the agenda here? Joint Plan Commission agenda for 11/12/24. Anything exciting coming up?
So it's all things that have been to Plan Commission before. So it's the rezone at 5939 State Highway 113. The CSM's annexation petition and SIP for between the First Presbyterian Church and Kilkenny West. And then changing the maximum allowable size of accessory buildings.
Very good.
The annexation, that's not gonna be impacted, is it?
No,
That was gonna
it
be
shouldn't be.
beforehand, right? Yeah.
All right. With that, we've run out of agenda items. Does anyone have an,
Sure.
all right,
Second.
all in favor? Aye. Opposed?